My darlings, I see you, all of you, 12 signs, and tonight I want to make a distinction that I do not think anybody has ever made for you plainly, and that I believe will change how you look at one particular situation in your life within about the next 4 minutes. In this astrology forecast, 5 zodiac signs are entering a no more delays era, and I am going to take them in a specific order tonight, ending with Leo, because Leo receives the strongest message in the whole of this reading, and I would rather you stayed for it than found it by accident 3 weeks from now. But before any of that, the distinction, because everything else follows from it. A wait and a delay are not the same thing. A wait has a gate. Something outside you has to happen before you can proceed. A decision from another person. A date on a calendar. A process that runs at its own pace regardless of how much you want it to run faster. A result. A season. In a genuine wait, my darlings, you can point at the gate. You can name it in a single sentence. And if somebody asked you what specifically has to occur before you can move, you would have an actual answer, involving somebody or something that is not you. A delay has no gate. Everything required already exists. Nothing external is missing. And if somebody asked you what specifically has to happen first, you would not be able to name an event. You would name a condition instead. When I am ready. When things settle down. When I have more time. When it feels right. My darlings, listen to what those 4 sentences actually have in common, because it is the whole of tonight. Every single one of them is assessed by you. There is no external gatekeeper anywhere in that list, which means the person deciding when the condition has been met and the person who has been waiting for it to be met are the same person, and that arrangement can continue, quite comfortably, for a very long time. And here is what I want to say before we go any further. Because I suspect a portion of you have already begun to feel accused, and that is not what tonight is. You have not been lazy. I want to say that at the very start rather than the very end, because 5 signs are receiving this reading, and not one of them is a lazy sign. Capricorn, Taurus, Virgo, Scorpio, and Leo are, between them, the 5 hardest working signs in the zodiac, and any astrologer who tells you your delay is a failure of effort has not looked at your chart, or at your life, or at how many hours you have already given to things that mattered considerably less than the thing you are currently not starting. Something else has been happening, something considerably more interesting, and considerably more forgivable, and I am going to tell you exactly what it is at the very end of this reading, because it takes the whole hour to earn. I am Madame Aurora, 35 years studying the stars from my office in Manhattan, and let me tell you what I am going to do tonight before I do it. First, I will tell you why these 5 signs specifically, and it is structural, and it is not a coincidence that these particular 5 ended up on tonight's list together. Then I will show you one card, and correct the reading of it that almost everybody gives you, because the popular version of this card has kept more people stuck than any other image in the deck. Then the 5 signs, one at a time, each with the particular delay mechanism that belongs to that sign and to no other. And I want you to listen for the same remark at the end of every section, because I say it 5 times, in 5 different forms, and if you catch the pattern before I name it outright, you will arrive at tonight's ending on your own, which is a considerably better way to receive it. Then 2 stories, one where a delay ended by choice, and one where it ended by something else entirely. And at the very end, the thing I have been saving, which is going to sound uncomfortable for roughly 30 seconds before it becomes, I think, the kindest sentence anybody has said to you about this in years. This reading is not tied to any month or year. I built it that way deliberately, because a delay does not run on a calendar, and the one you are carrying tonight will be exactly as answerable whenever you find this as it is this evening. Now let me tell you why these 5. Look at what they have in common, because it is not a mood and it is not a personality trait. It is structure. Capricorn is cardinal earth. Taurus is fixed earth. Virgo is mutable earth. That is the whole of the earth element, my darlings, all 3 of them, sitting on tonight's list together. And Taurus is fixed. Leo is fixed. Scorpio is fixed. That is 3 of the 4 fixed signs. Which means every single sign in tonight's reading is a holder. Every one of you holds, either by element or by modality, and 2 of you, Taurus most of all, hold by both at once. Let me explain what holding actually means, because I do not want it heard as a criticism. Earth signs require solid ground before they will step. That is not timidity. It is the correct instinct for an element whose entire function in the zodiac is to make things real, durable, and usable. And an earth sign that stepped onto ground it had not tested would not be earth at all. Every building any of us has ever stood inside was made by somebody with an earth sign attitude toward foundations, whatever their actual birthday. And fixed signs hold position. That is the function of the fixed modality. The cardinal signs begin things. The mutable signs change things. And the fixed signs are the ones who stay when staying is difficult, which is why every long project, every long marriage, and every institution that has survived a difficult decade has a fixed sign somewhere near the middle of it, holding. My darlings, both of those are genuine strengths, and I would not remove either one from any of you. But a strength that has no natural off switch becomes something else over a long enough period, and neither holding nor testing the ground contains any instruction, anywhere inside it, about when to stop. Earth will keep testing. Fixed will keep holding. Nothing in either mechanism ever says, "That is enough now, go." That is why these 5 signs, my darlings. Not because you are more afraid than the other 7. Because you are better at holding than the other 7. And the very best holders in the zodiac are, by definition, the ones most capable of holding something for 11 years without it ever once feeling like a decision. Now let me show you the card, and there is one tonight rather than 3, because a delay is not a complicated situation with several moving parts. It is one situation, held in place for a long time, and 3 cards would suggest complexity that simply is not there. The card is the Hanged Man, a figure suspended upside down from a T-shaped wooden beam, hanging by one ankle. His arms are behind his back. One leg is crossed casually behind the other. And around his head, in every traditional deck, a golden halo, bright and unmistakable. And his face, my darlings, is entirely serene. Now, everybody reads this card the same way, and the popular reading has kept more people stuck than any other image in the deck, so I want to correct it properly. The popular reading is surrender, suspension. You cannot do anything, so accept the pause, release your grip on the outcome, and wait for the universe to release you when it is ready. My darlings, look at the picture. He is hanging by one ankle. 1. The rope is around a single ankle, and the other leg is not bound to anything at all. It is crossed, loosely, behind the first, in a position no rope is holding it in. In most decks, his hands are behind his back, but there is nothing visibly tying them there either. That figure can get down. I want you to sit with how much that changes the card. This is not a person trapped by circumstance, held in suspension by a force outside himself, waiting to be released by something that has not yet decided to release him. This is a person hanging, comfortably, in a position he is entirely capable of ending, and whose face suggests he is not in any particular distress about it. And that is why it is the exact card for tonight, my darlings, and why I would not use any other. The Hanged Man is not the card of being stuck. It is the card of a suspension that has become comfortable, maintained by somebody who has one free leg and has stopped noticing that it is free. Now, the halo. I am not going to tell you the pause was worthless, because the card does not say that and I do not believe it. That halo is genuine. It is the traditional symbol of real insight, actual understanding, something valuable that was gained precisely by hanging there and seeing the world from an angle nobody upright ever sees it from. Whatever your delay has been, my darlings, it has not been empty. You have learned things in it. You know things now that you did not know when it began, and that knowledge is real and it is yours, and nothing tonight is going to take it from you. And there is one more thing in that image, and it is the detail I am saving, because it is the whole of what I want to give you at the end of this hour. I will come back to it. For now, hold the halo and the free leg together, because those 2 facts sitting in the same picture is the entire situation of every one of tonight's 5 signs. Now let us begin. Let us go to Capricorn. My darling Capricorn, your delay has a specific shape, and it is the most respectable looking of tonight's 5, which is precisely why it goes unexamined for so long. Your sign is ruled by Saturn, which is, in the oldest language of this practice, the planet of time itself, of structure, of consequence, of the thing that must be earned rather than given. Saturn takes roughly 29.5 years to complete a single circuit of the zodiac, which is longer than any of the personal planets by an enormous margin, and it is why your sign genuinely thinks in decades while the people around you are thinking in quarters. That is not a flaw, my darling. It is why you are still standing at the end of things everybody else abandoned in year 3. But Saturn has a second property, and it is the one that produces your delay. Saturn believes in sequence, in the correct order, in the idea that there are rungs, and that a rung skipped is a structure weakened, and that anything built out of order will eventually fail at exactly the point where the order was broken. So your delay does not sound like fear, my darling, and it does not feel like fear either. It sounds like this. I am not there yet. I have not earned that. There is a step before this one, and I have not finished it. And here is the trap, and I want to name it precisely, because it is not obvious from inside. Your sign is waiting for a permission that nobody in the structure has been assigned to give. You have been assuming, quite reasonably, that when the previous rung is genuinely complete, something in the environment will acknowledge it. A title, a signal, a person with the standing to say, yes, you have earned the next one now, go ahead. That is how a properly ordered structure ought to work, and your sign has been operating on the assumption that the world is a properly ordered structure, because you would have built it as one. My darling, in almost every arrangement I have observed in 35 years, there is nobody whose actual job is granting that permission. The rung is not marked. Nobody is watching your progression closely enough to certify it. And so a Capricorn who is waiting to be told she has earned the next step can wait for a very long time inside a structure that has no mechanism for telling her, doing genuinely excellent work at a level considerably below the one she is ready for. The version I hear most often from your sign is some form of, when I have a bit more experience. And what I always ask, and what I would ask you now, is this. How much more? Precisely. Name the amount. Give me the threshold in a number of years, or a number of completed projects, or a specific qualification with an actual name. Almost nobody can answer that. And a threshold that cannot be stated is not a threshold, my darling. It is a feeling. And feelings do not have completion conditions, and Saturn will happily keep you in an apprenticeship you finished some years ago, because nothing in the sequence ever announced that it was over. And here is the remark I will make at the end of every section tonight, so listen for it. My darling Capricorn, notice that you have not been avoiding this. You have been earning your way toward it, methodically, for years, and you are almost certainly further along the sequence than the last person who took the step you are still preparing for. Now let me speak to Taurus, and my darling, I want to tell you something about your own chart that I do not think anybody has ever put to you directly. You are the only sign in the entire zodiac that is both earth and fixed. Look at what that means, structurally, tonight of all nights. Earth requires solid ground before stepping. Fixed holds position once taken. Every other sign in this reading has one of those two mechanisms. You have both of them, running simultaneously, in the same chart, reinforcing each other. That is not a criticism, my darling, and I want to be extremely clear about that before I go further, because your sign is routinely and unfairly described as stubborn by people who have never once had to rely on somebody the way people rely on you. The combination of earth and fixed is precisely why you are the most dependable sign in the zodiac, why your word is worth more than most people's contracts, and why anything you have committed to in your life is almost certainly still standing. And it is also, structurally and unavoidably, why you are the most delay-prone sign in the entire zodiac, and why your delays are the longest. Here is your specific mechanism, and it is different from Capricorn's. Capricorn delays because the sequence is incomplete. You delay because the current arrangement is still tolerable. That is the whole of it, my darling. Your sign is ruled by Venus, which values comfort genuinely and correctly, and your fixed earth nature makes disruption expensive in a way that other signs simply do not experience. When a Gemini changes something, the change costs her almost nothing, because she was never fully settled into the previous arrangement to begin with. When you change something, you are dismantling something you have built, furnished, made comfortable and put roots into, and the cost is real. I am not going to pretend it is imaginary, because it is not. So your sign has a threshold, and the threshold is not, is this good, or is this what I want? The threshold is, has this become intolerable? And here is the trap, and it is the most expensive trap in tonight's entire reading. A situation that is merely disappointing, mildly wrong, or quietly beneath what you are capable of, will never, on its own, become intolerable. That is precisely what makes it so dangerous. Genuinely intolerable situations announce themselves and get dealt with. It is the tolerable ones that last 11 years, because every single morning, the honest answer to "is this bad enough to justify the disruption?" is no, not quite, not today. 11 years is 4,000 consecutive mornings where the honest answer was no, not quite, my darling, and not one of those individual answers was wrong. Which means your delays do not usually end by decision. They end by crisis, when the situation finally deteriorates enough to clear your threshold on its own. And I want to be honest that this is generally a considerably worse way for something to end than the version where you chose the timing. The intervention for your sign is therefore different from everybody else's tonight, and it is one question. Not "is this bad enough?" Ask instead, if nothing at all about this changes for 5 more years, is that acceptable to me? That question bypasses your threshold entirely, my darling, because it removes the comparison to today and replaces it with the accumulated cost of a decade, and most Tauruses I have asked that question have answered it before I finished the sentence. And there it is again, in its second form. My darling Taurus, notice that you have not been neglecting this. You have been making it work, patiently, better than almost anybody else could have made it work, for considerably longer than it deserved. Now, before I go to Virgo, let me pause for a moment. If what I have said so far is landing, if you recognized your own mechanism in one of the first two, tap that little like button below this video. It is a small gesture, and it does something real, which is tell YouTube to carry this to somebody who has been waiting for a permission nobody was assigned to give her. And if you are not yet subscribed, this is the moment, because 3 signs remain, and the last one, Leo, receives the strongest message in this entire reading. Now let me speak to Virgo. My darling Virgo, your delay is the one most often mistaken for diligence, including by you, and I suspect it is the one you would defend most vigorously if anybody challenged it. Your sign is mutable Earth, ruled by Mercury facing inward, which means you are the only Earth sign with an analytical engine running continuously on top of the Earth caution. Capricorn tests the ground and then builds. Taurus tests the ground and then settles. You test the ground and then test it again, because your Mercury noticed something about the first test that could be improved. Your mechanism is the remaining flaw. There is always one. That is not a personal failing, my darling. It is a mathematical property of having an extremely good eye. Any project, plan, application, message, business, painting, or piece of work examined closely by a Virgo will produce a list of things that are not yet right, and that list has a property nobody warns you about, which is that it regenerates. You fix the 3 things on the list, and in the process of fixing them, you see the work more clearly than you did before, which means you now see 4 things that were invisible at the previous level of quality. So the list is not shorter. It has simply moved up a level, and it will do that again and again, indefinitely, because the resolution of your own eye improves alongside the work. My darling, this is why your sign can spend 6 years getting something ready and be genuinely, honestly astonished that 6 years have passed. From inside, every single one of those 6 years contained real, visible, measurable improvement. Nothing about it felt like stalling. It felt like the opposite of stalling. Here is the sentence I want you to hold. Your work does not get finished. It gets released. Those are 2 entirely different events, and only one of them is available. Finished is a state where nothing further could be improved, and for a Virgo eye, that state does not exist and never will, at any level of quality, on any project, ever. Released is a decision, made on a date, about a version that is good enough for its actual purpose, rather than good enough for your standard. And your sign is waiting for the first one, which is not coming, in order to do the second one, which has been available for some time. The practical version is a deadline, and it has to be a date rather than a condition, for exactly the reason I gave at the start of this reading. Not when the last 3 things are fixed, because there are never 3. A date, written down, after which the current version goes out regardless of its remaining flaws. And the remaining flaws, my darling, are almost always invisible to everybody except you. And there it is a third time. My darling Virgo, notice that you have not been putting this off. You have been improving it, genuinely and measurably. And the version sitting on your desk tonight is considerably better than the version most people would have released 4 years ago. Now, before I go to Scorpio, do something with me. It takes 20 seconds and it works whatever your sign. Think of the thing. Whatever arrived when I made the distinction at the start of this reading, between a wait and a delay. Do not let your mind substitute a more comfortable example. Now answer one question, honestly, in a single sentence. What specifically has to happen before you can begin? If your answer contains a person, a date, a decision that is not yours to make, or a process running outside your control, my darling, you are in a genuine wait, and this reading is not an accusation aimed at you. Nothing in the next 40 minutes is asking you to force something whose gate is genuinely held by somebody else. But if your answer was a condition rather than an event, when I am ready, when things calm down, when I have more time, when it feels right, then you have just heard yourself name a gate with nobody standing at it except you. Hold your answer. I am going to come back to it. Now let me speak to Scorpio. My darling Scorpio, yours is the most sophisticated delay in tonight's reading. And I mean that genuinely, rather than as a compliment wrapped around a criticism. It is genuinely more intelligent than the other 4, and it is also the only one of the 5 that is mathematically impossible to satisfy, and I want to show you exactly why. Your sign is fixed water, ruled traditionally by Mars, and in modern practice by Pluto, and its defining quality is not intensity, whatever the internet tells you. It is depth of perception. Your sign sees what is underneath a situation faster and more accurately than any other sign in the Zodiac, and it has learned, usually early and usually the hard way, that being caught unprepared by another person's true position is the single most dangerous thing that can happen to it. So your mechanism is certainty about the other party. You will not commit, declare, ask, apply, or expose your actual position until you know how the other side will respond. Not guess. No. And your sign is so good at reading people that this almost works, which is precisely what makes it so durable a trap. You get to 80%, or 90%, and 90% is close enough to feel like the remaining 10 is obtainable with a little more observation. Now here is the impossibility, my darling, and I want you to sit with it because I think it is the most useful thing I can tell your sign. The information you are waiting for does not exist yet. It is not hidden somewhere, waiting to be perceived by somebody sufficiently observant. How another person will respond to your actual, exposed, committed position is not a fact currently sitting in the world for you to detect. It is a thing that will come into existence at the moment you expose the position, and not 1 second before. So you are withholding the exact action that would generate the information, until you have the information that only that action can generate. That is a closed loop, my darling. It cannot resolve. And your sign, more than any other in this reading, is capable of holding a closed loop for a decade while continuing to believe, quite sincerely, that it is gathering intelligence rather than avoiding exposure. I want to add one thing, gently, because I think it is underneath the mechanism. The reason your sign requires certainty before exposure is almost never arrogance. It is that being seen wanting something and then not receiving it is an experience your sign finds genuinely harder to survive than most people do. Not embarrassing, harder. And so the certainty is not really about strategy at all. It is armor. And it is armor against a specific injury that most of you can name and date if you are honest. And there it is a 4th time. My darling Scorpio, notice that you have not been hesitating. You have been reading the situation thoroughly and accurately, and you almost certainly understand what you are walking into better than the person who walked into it already. Now let me tell you about Wilhelmina, because I think her story will make the last of tonight's 5 signs land considerably harder. Wilhelmina was a Capricorn client of mine, born in early January, who came to me in her 50s about a qualification. She worked in a technical field, and there was a senior credential in that field, a genuine one, with an examination attached to it that she had been intending to take for, by her own accounting when I finally pushed her for a number, 19 years. 19 years, my darlings. And I want to be extremely clear that Wilhelmina was not a person who avoided difficult things. She had built a career in that same field over 3 decades, had trained a considerable number of people who now held the credentials she did not, and had been asked, more than once, to sit on panels evaluating the work of people who held it. I asked her the question I asked you a few minutes ago. What specifically has to happen before you can take it? She said she wanted to be sure she would pass. I asked what that would look like, concretely, what she would need to see, in herself or in her preparation, in order to be sure. And she said something I have quoted ever since, because I think it is the most honest sentence I have ever heard a Capricorn produce about a delay. She said, "I do not actually know. I have been telling myself for 19 years that I am nearly ready, and I have never once sat down and defined what ready would be, because I think I have known the whole time that if I defined it, I would already have met it." She sat the examination 14 months after that session. Not immediately, and I want to be honest about that, because her sign does not move immediately, and I did not ask her to. She defined a threshold, on paper, in a single sentence, and then she met the threshold, which took about 5 months, and then she sat it. She passed comfortably. That is not the interesting part of the story, and I would not have told it to you if it were. The interesting part is what she said afterward. She said that during the examination, at maybe the halfway point, she had a very strange experience of realizing that she was not merely going to pass, but that she was answering the questions at a level considerably above what the examination was actually asking for. She said, "I did not scrape through with 19 years of anxiety behind me. I was substantially overqualified, and I had been overqualified for something like a decade, and I sat there in that room, genuinely angry for about 90 seconds, about the 10 years I had spent getting ready for something I had already been ready for. Hold on to that, my darlings. It is where I am going. And now let me speak to Leo, and I have saved you for last on purpose, because your delay is the one that hides best, and because I think it is the most poignant of tonight's 5. My darling Leo, your sign is fixed fire, ruled by the sun, and I want to be precise about your mechanism, because on the surface it looks like nothing at all. You are not visibly hesitant. Your sign does not present as somebody stalling. If anything, you present as the opposite, which is exactly why nobody has ever named this for you. Your delay is not about whether. It is about how it begins. You are not waiting for permission, the way Capricorn is. You are not waiting for the situation to become intolerable, the way Taurus is. You are not waiting for the flaw to be fixed or the other party to be readable. You are waiting to be able to begin it properly. Not tentatively, not badly, not in the small, unimpressive, faintly embarrassing form that a beginning actually takes. You are waiting until you can start the thing at a standard that is worth being seen doing. And here is the trap, my darling, and it is airtight. A beginning is, by definition, the least impressive stage of anything that has ever existed. Everything is worse at the start. Every business, every skill, every piece of creative work, every version of a person doing something for the first time is at its clumsiest, thinnest, and most obviously amateur in the opening stretch. And that is not a flaw in how you would do it. That is simply what a beginning is, for everybody, including every single person you currently admire. So your sign is waiting for a version of a start that does not exist anywhere in the world, in order to avoid the only version that does. I want to say what I think is actually underneath it, because your sign deserves the honest version rather than the flattering one. Your sign is ruled by the sun, which does not orbit anything, and which everything else in the chart is measured against. And one consequence of that placement is that you have almost never had the experience of being the least competent person in a room. Rooms have turned toward you since you were young. Your gift arrives early, and it arrives visibly. And it means that a great deal of your life has been spent operating at a level where you were already good. Beginning something new means being bad at it, in public, for a period, and that is not a small ask for you. It is genuinely a larger ask for your sign than for almost any other, and I do not think anybody has ever acknowledged that to you before telling you to simply go for it. So the version I hear from Leos is never, "I cannot do this." It is always some form of, "Not like this, not yet, not in this form, not at this scale, not with what I currently have to work with." And my darling, That sentence can run for 20 years, because there is always a version of the current circumstances that falls short of the entrance you had in mind. Here is what I would offer you instead, and it is the only instruction in tonight's reading that is designed specifically for a Leo. Begin it privately, not permanently, and not in hiding, because that is not your nature, and I would not ask it of you. Simply for the first stretch, give yourself a period, defined in advance, in which the thing exists but is not yet being presented, and during which being bad at it is not a public event. Your sign can tolerate being a beginner enormously better when the beginning is not also a performance, and the version of you that emerges from a private opening stretch is precisely the version that can then begin it properly, in the way you always wanted to. The entrance you have been waiting for is real, my darling. It simply comes second, not first. And there it is for the fifth and final time. My darling Leo, notice that you have not been hiding from this. You have been holding it to a standard, for years, and the standard you are holding it to is almost certainly higher than the one currently being met by whoever is already doing it. Now, my darlings, let me speak to the 7 signs I have not named tonight, because delay is not the exclusive property of the earth and fixed signs, and I do not believe in a reading that gives 5 of you the whole of my attention and leaves everybody else standing outside. Aries, your delay is rare and short, and when it happens, it is almost always about a single specific person whose reaction you are avoiding rather than about the task itself. Your sign does not stall on work. It stalls on one conversation, and it stalls on it completely. Gemini, your delay is the open decision. You are not avoiding action. You are declining to close an option, and I have made an entire reading about that for your sign alone, because it is a considerably larger subject than one paragraph allows. Cancer, your delay is protective, and it is nearly always about somebody else. You will not move while you believe moving would cost a person you love something they cannot currently afford, and I would ask you only to notice whether you have actually asked them or whether you have decided it on their behalf. Libra, your delay is the unresolved comparison. 2 options, weighed endlessly, because choosing means one of them loses, and your sign experiences a closed door as a small injustice done to the road not taken. Sagittarius, your delay is unusual because it does not look like one. Your sign begins things readily and abandons them at roughly 60%, which produces the same outcome as a delay, arriving from the opposite direction. Your task is not starting, it is finishing what is already started. Aquarius, your delay is conditional on the system being right. You will not commit to something built on a structure you consider flawed, which is principled, and which has also cost a number of you years spent waiting for an acceptable version of an imperfect world. And Pisces, your delay is the softest of all 12 and therefore the hardest to interrupt. It is not refusal, it is dissolution. The thing does not get declined. It simply never quite arrives at the top of the day, again, for a long time. And your sign very often does not experience it as a delay at all until several years have passed. Every one of you has a mechanism, my darlings, whether or not your sign was one of tonight's 5. Now let me tell you the other kind of story, because I have told you the one where a delay ended by choice. Augusta was a Taurus client of mine who came to me some years ago, in her late 40s, about a business. She had run a small shop for 22 years. It had been genuinely good for the first 12, adequate for the next 6, and quietly declining, in the way these things decline, for the last 4. She could tell me the figures, she was not confused about the situation, and she was not in denial about it. She simply had not done anything, because every single morning of those 4 years, the honest answer to the question, is this bad enough to justify closing something I built over 22 years, had been no, not quite, not today. I asked her the question I gave your sign earlier. If nothing changes for 5 more years, is that acceptable? She said no, immediately, without any pause at all, and then she looked genuinely startled at herself for having answered so fast. And then she did not act on it. I want to be honest about that, because this is the cautionary story rather than the triumphant one, and I do not think a reading is worth much if every client in it does the sensible thing after one good session. She went back, and the shop was still tolerable, and tolerable is enormously powerful for a fixed earth sign, and 11 more months passed. What ended it was not a decision. The building's owner sold the property, and the new arrangement was not one Augusta could sustain, and the shop closed inside about 4 months on terms she had no part in setting. She told me afterward that the closing itself was not the painful part. She had known for years it was coming, in some form. What she found hardest, she said, was that in the version where she had chosen it 11 months earlier, she would have had time to sell the stock properly, to tell her regular customers herself, rather than through a sign in a window, and to leave with the shape of the ending in her own hands. She said, and I have kept this ever since. I did not lose the shop because I waited. The shop was going to end either way. I lost the ending. That was the only part that was ever actually mine, and I waited until somebody else took it. My darling Tauruses, that is the specific cost I want you to weigh, and it is not the one your threshold is measuring. Your threshold asks whether the situation is bad enough to change. It never asks what you are giving up by letting the change be made for you, and the answer, in nearly every case I have watched, is the terms. Pause with me for a moment. I know this has been a great deal. Now let me address something before I give you the last part, because a reading built on this particular distinction owes you honesty about the cases it does not cover. Some of you are genuinely in a wait, and I said at the beginning that I would not treat that as a failure, and I meant it. If what stands between you and the thing is a person who has not decided, a medical process running at its own pace, a legal matter, a child who is not yet old enough, a financial reality that is simply not yet in place, then you have a gate, my darling, and a real one, and nothing tonight is asking you to force it. The distinction I gave you at the start of this hour exists precisely to protect you from an hour of advice that was never addressed to your situation. And there is a third category, which is neither a wait nor a delay, and I want to name it plainly because it gets mistaken for both. If you cannot begin, and you also cannot prepare, and the not beginning does not feel like careful holding, but like something heavier sitting on top of you, that is not the mechanism I have been describing tonight. The 5 delays in this reading all involve activity. Capricorn is climbing, Taurus is maintaining, Virgo is improving, Scorpio is observing, Leo is holding to a standard. Every one of them is doing something. If you are doing nothing, and the nothing has lasted a while, and it does not feel like preparation but like wait, my darling, that is worth speaking to a professional about, sooner rather than later. That is not Saturn, and it is not a delay mechanism, and no amount of well-reasoned astrology is the correct tool for it. I would considerably rather say that plainly, once, than let an hour of this reading be heard as an instruction to push harder against something that actually requires support. Now let me give you the practical part, because a description is not a method. There are 4 things, and they are the same 4 for all 5 signs, though each sign will find a different one hardest. The first, convert your condition into a date. This is the whole of it, and everything else is detail. Whatever your condition is, when I am ready, when it settles down, when the last things are fixed, when I know how they will respond, replace it with a specific day, written where you will see it, after which the thing happens regardless of whether the condition has been met. Your sign will object that this is arbitrary. It is arbitrary, my darling. That is precisely why it works. A condition has no completion point, which is why it has held for years. A date has one, and the arbitrariness of the date is the only thing that gives it the property the condition was always missing. The second, define the threshold in one sentence, on paper, before the date. This is Wilhelmina's step, and it is the one that did the actual work in her case. Not a plan, a single written sentence stating what ready would concretely consist of. Most people in a long delay have never written that sentence, and a substantial number of them discover, the way she did, that they met the threshold some years ago and simply never checked, because an unwritten standard cannot be measured against and therefore can never be passed. The third, make the first action small enough to be embarrassing. Not the whole thing. The smallest possible physical step that cannot be undone by a change of mood. Send one message. Make one booking. Register for one thing. Tell one person a date. Your sign will want the first action to be proportionate to the size of the thing, and a proportionate first action is exactly the one that never happens, because its size returns you to the same threshold you have been failing to clear for years. And the fourth, tell one person the date, out loud. Not for accountability in the nagging sense, which none of tonight's 5 signs respond well to, for a considerably more mechanical reason. A date that exists only in your own head is a date you are permitted to renegotiate privately, and all 5 of tonight's signs are extremely capable negotiators when the only party at the table is themselves. A date that another human being has heard becomes a different kind of object, and it is considerably harder to quietly move. Now let me give you the ritual, and it is short, and it does exactly one thing. Find 20 minutes and somewhere you will not be interrupted. A black or dark blue candle for Saturn if you like one, which is the traditional color for the planet of time and structure. And if you have none, my darling, it changes nothing at all, because the object was never the mechanism. Take a single sheet of paper. Draw one line down the middle. On the left, write the heading, "What I have been waiting for." Write it plainly, in the words you actually use in your own head, not the polished version, the real one, when I am ready, when things settle, when I know. On the right, write the heading, "Who decides when that has happened?" And then answer it honestly, for each line on the left. My darlings, this is the entire ritual, and it takes about 4 minutes once you have started. And for most of you, the right-hand column is going to contain one word repeated all the way down the page. When you have finished, at the bottom of the sheet, write one date. Any date, chosen by you, within the next 90 days. And underneath it, one sentence, in your own handwriting. On this date, it begins, whether or not the condition has been met. Then keep the page. Do not burn it, which a great many rituals would tell you to do, and which would be precisely wrong here. Put it somewhere you will encounter it before the date arrives, because the entire purpose of this exercise is that a future version of you, on an ordinary Tuesday, walks past a piece of paper in her own handwriting, with a date on it, and remembers that she was the one who said it. And now, my darlings, let me give you the thing I have been saving the whole of this hour. I said the same remark at the end of every single section tonight. Capricorn, you have not been avoiding this. You have been earning your way toward it. Taurus, you have not been neglecting it. You have been making it work. Virgo, you have not been putting it off. You have been improving it. Scorpio, you have not been hesitating. You have been reading the situation. Leo, you have not been hiding. You have been holding it to a standard. 5 signs, 5 different mechanisms, and the same fact underneath every one of them, and here it is. You were never procrastinating. I want to say that clearly, because I think a great many of you have spent years quietly filing yourself under a word that has never once accurately described what you were doing. Procrastination is avoidance. It is not doing a thing because doing it is unpleasant, and it produces a very specific and recognizable sensation, which is guilt, alongside an absence of activity. That is genuinely what some people are doing. It is not what any of tonight's 5 signs have been doing. Every one of you has been working. Capricorn climbing, Taurus maintaining, Virgo refining, Scorpio observing, Leo holding a standard. There has been continuous, genuine, effortful activity in every single one of those 5 mechanisms, and that is precisely why none of you recognized it as a delay, and precisely why nobody around you challenged it either. It did not look like avoidance because it was not avoidance. You were preparing. And here is the thing about preparation that nobody tells you, my darlings, and it is the actual mechanism underneath the whole of tonight's reading. Preparation is the only form of work in the world that can be performed indefinitely without ever producing a result. Every other kind of work eventually delivers something. You build a wall, and at some point the wall exists. You write a letter, and at some point the letter is sent. But preparation does not produce an object. It produces readiness. And readiness is not a state, my darlings, it is a feeling, and a feeling can always be improved by a small amount, which means preparation has no completion condition built into it anywhere. It is the one activity you can do faithfully, diligently, in genuine good conscience, for 10 years, without ever once encountering a natural moment where it announces that it is finished. That is why the delay held, not because you were weak, and not because you were frightened, though a portion of you were, and that is entirely reasonable. Because you were doing something virtuous that has no ending, and nothing in it was ever going to tell you to stop. And now let me give you the turn, because everything I have just said is the uncomfortable half, and this is the half I actually built the hour for. You are not behind, my darlings. You are overprepared. Every single person who is already doing the thing you have not yet started began less ready than you are tonight. Not slightly less. Substantially less, in almost every case I have observed in 35 years. They did not begin because they were better prepared than you. They began because they had a lower threshold for beginning, and a lower threshold for beginning is not a competence and it is not a virtue. It is simply a different setting on a dial, and yours is set higher because you are an earth sign, or a fixed sign, or, in Taurus's case, both. Wilhelmina sat in that examination room and discovered she had been overqualified for a decade. That was not a coincidence of her particular case. That is the standard result, my darlings, and I have watched it play out more times than I can count, because the mechanism guarantees it. A person who will not begin until she is ready, applying a standard that regenerates, will inevitably cross the actual requirement years before she crosses her own, and will spend the intervening years believing she is running behind, while she is in fact running considerably ahead. And there is one thing more, and it is the reason I chose that particular card. Do you remember the Hanged Man? The figure suspended by one ankle, with the free leg crossed casually behind it, and the golden halo around his head. I told you the halo was real. Whatever you learned in the suspension is genuinely yours, and nothing tonight takes it away from you. Here is the detail I saved. He is hanging from a living tree. In every traditional rendering of that card, the beam he hangs from is not dead timber. It is a tree, in leaf, putting out new growth, and in most decks you can see the buds clearly along the crossbeam. It grew while he hung there. My darlings, that is the whole of what I have been trying to give you tonight. The time was not lost. The tree grew. You are not the same person who first began waiting for the condition to be met, and every year of that preparation put something real into you that is still there tonight and will still be there on the date you write at the bottom of the page. The suspension was never wasted. It is simply that a tree in leaf is not a reason to keep hanging. It is the proof that the hanging worked. My darlings, before I let you go, 3 small things. 1. If any part of this reading found you tonight, if you recognized your own mechanism in one of the 5, if Wilhelmina's 90 seconds of anger or Augusta's lost ending landed somewhere real, tap that like button. It is the simplest way to tell YouTube to carry this to somebody who has been calling herself lazy for 11 years about something she has been quietly preparing for the entire time. 2. Subscribe and turn on the bell. I make these readings for every sign, and I make them so they can be found whenever somebody needs them, rather than only during a particular week. If you become a member of this channel, readings reach you before they are published, and you and I actually speak in the comments, because I read member comments first, and I answer there more often and more personally than I am able to anywhere else. 3. And this is the one I care about most. Do not tell me the thing. All 5 of tonight's signs would describe it beautifully and at length, and the describing is very close to the preparing. Give me the date, the one you wrote at the bottom of the page. That is all. I read every single comment, truly, and I want to tell you why I am asking for a date rather than a story. Because a comment section full of explanations is a comment section of extremely capable people preparing, in public, one more time. A comment section full of dates is 40 people who have each, in about 9 seconds, converted a condition that has held for years into an appointment that has not. And if this reading gave you something and you ever want to say thank you more directly, a super thanks is never expected and always felt, and it is a genuine part of how I keep making these readings as carefully as I make them. If you know somebody who has been nearly ready for a very long time, send this to her tonight. You may not realize how much a single share matters. It is how this work finds the person who needs it. Thank you, my darlings. This community has become something I genuinely did not expect when I began. 5 zodiac signs are entering a no more delays era. That is the title, and I believe it, and I want to close by telling you exactly what I mean by it, because it is not what you thought when this hour began. It does not mean the sky is about to remove an obstacle that has been holding you in place. There was no obstacle, my darlings. That is the entire finding of tonight's reading. There was a condition, assessed by you, with nobody else standing at the gate. It means the era in which a delay could still be honestly mistaken for a wait is ending, and it is ending because you now know the difference, and you cannot unknow it. From tonight, the sentence "when I am ready" has a name and a mechanism and a person standing behind it whose handwriting you would recognize. Capricorn, through the permission nobody was assigned to give. Taurus, through the arrangement that will never quite become intolerable on its own. Virgo, through the list that regenerates every time you improve. Scorpio, through the certainty that only exists on the other side of the exposure. And Leo, my darling, through the entrance that always comes second, never first. You have one free leg. You always did. And the tree is in leaf, my darlings, which means the years were not wasted. And it also means that quite a lot of time has passed while you were getting ready for something you were ready for some while ago. Write the date, 90 days. Nobody is coming to tell you that you have earned it. I am Madame Aurora from Manhattan, and I love you, all 12 signs of the Zodiac. I will see you in the next reading.